Hello guys and welcome back to DarkHorse FM, and in this video I'm going to share with you some of the lessons that I wish I knew sooner in Football Manager 2023. By the end of this video you should be able to spot your losing streak coming from like a mile away. You'll also be able to put an end to all those 1-1 draws and kind of transform them into 1-0 wins or 3-0 wins. These tips will be able to get you over the line and secure a trophy. The lessons I learned later on in this game enabled me to secure a trophy against a Barcelona side that was in form and on a 5-game winning streak. We were able to secure the Spanish Cup on penalties, but that's due to doing what we needed to do to try and stay in the game, even though they were a much better team than we were. So I'll get into the lessons now, and if you're new to the channel, do want to subscribe and also leave a like for this video. It helps support the channel a lot. So let's get into those lessons. So tip number one, don't do this. Like you can see this NAPS 4-4-4-1-4-1 system. Ignore all the players that are on holiday right now. But what I noticed on Football Manager 2023 is like the high pressing intensity tactics don't really, as much as they need to get you wins once in a while, they will somehow destroy your team in the long run. So if you want to try to sustain yourself and try to stay ahead most of the time, you need to find a way to tweak your tactic and also lower the intensity once in a while so your team don't get shattered all through the season. And I don't know if anybody has the squad depth to actually execute a tactic like this. If you do have the squad depth, good for you. If you have a big squad, this can actually work out for you quite well because you do have a lot of players fill in and sub some other players and then start a brand new squad in your next game, and that will be fine. But if you have a slim squad and let's say you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of depth in your squad, you really don't want to go ahead and blow your intensity like this and have your players go a very high intensity tactic. It's going to actually cause you more problems in the long run of your season, and you're going to have to find a way to lower that intensity. So I'm going to clear the NAP formation. I'm currently at Joe Vicente. This is one save that I know I forgot that I actually played, so I'm going to clear the entire team now, and then I'm going to remove the NAP tactic as well because it was useful for the first example. You don't really want to overpress your team and then go into like gung-ho mode all the time. It's going to cost you. So we're going to click a brand new tactic now, for example something at random. So you can just see here in the 4-3-3 that I have. The thing about tactics on Football Manager 2023 that you need to understand is that the game is so dynamic and the AI is constantly changing and adapting to your team system. So if you do have one tactic that kind of works for you, you have to find a way to tweak that tactic and have like 3 or 4, 5 multiple versions of this tactic in your head. In a way that I know Football Manager only limits you to have 3 slots, but you need to have a way to tweak this tactic. Let's say I do have a defensive midfielder here on defend duty. There are certain systems where you're going to play with a different team that is not using a number 10, and then they're actually overloading you in a different position, and then you have to find a way to actually fix that. So having your players that can play as inverted fullbacks on or inverted wingbacks on attack duty, on support duty, you have a player that is good on both feet, find a way to actually make him play as an inverted wingback in some of your tactics, and as a fullback or wingback on support duty in another version of your tactics. So it kind of keeps your team dynamic, even though the shape of a team is constantly staying the same, like a 4-3-3 like I'm using here as example, one of my favorite formations by the way. Find a way to make your tactic dynamic. And looking at the defensive midfielder here, you can have a different tactic where you're not using a defensive midfielder, you're using a deep line playmaker on support duty, for example. Or if you're going counter attacking, you can go for a regista on support duty. Just have a way to make your team unpredictable, and even though you're still keeping the same shape that you have. We'll come back to tactic in just a minute, so let me just jump over to training because this is the one that I really got slapped in the face when it had a lot to do with training. So if you go to your training schedule on Football Manager, let's say there's a calendar here. I need to move forward to, yeah, this is perfect. So if you have a calendar on Football Manager, if you're new to the game, you don't really want to mess around with your training schedules. Let me just tell you that, like for example, because I've messed around with this and then it kind of cost us. And I've also applied my training schedules and tweaked it myself. I've gotten used to tweaking it, and then it sort of found a way to give me good results. But if you don't know what you're doing in training, don't even bother trying to tweak it because you might just cause your team more problems. So what I noticed, or what I would recommend for you to do, is on a Saturday like this, let's say you don't have much practice. On a Saturday, you have a game on Saturday, and then it's going to look something like this. Just pretend that the match practice is an actual match, and then you have a schedule on Saturday. You have a game on Saturday. Make sure you always have match review selected. Currently in match preparation, since we're off season, the match review option is not actually on screen right now. But before every, or let's say after every game, you do want to include match review. That's going to increase your team's tactical familiarity and help them understand the previous game that they just played where they made mistakes, and then they might go on to not make those mistakes anymore. That's kind of what match preview does, and I recommend that you have it on every single week after every single game, if possible. The next lesson I learned came from finances, money on Football Manager, and I have to admit that the Football Manager AI has to be the greediest AI I've ever seen in gaming experience. I don't even understand how they're that smart. So what happens is that if you're trying to go on to sign a player on Football Manager, the AI is going to obviously ask you for a lot more money than they're willing to pay for your own players. So what you have to do with signing players on Football Manager is just be very careful. If you're a rich club like Man City or Paris Saint-Germain, don't overspend a lot of your money if you're not going to win any trophies. You have to find a way to win trophies, and if you're a sugar daddy club that your board of directors always just somehow gives you money, don't always waste it on random players that you might end up selling for low prices much later. Try to take your Football Manager seriously, your finances seriously. Make more of investments rather than splashy spending. If you see a player that is a young player that could be of good potential, go on to sign that player, and then if you go on to sign him, try to find a way to sell him off much later if he's for good money. If a bigger team comes for him with a good amount of money, be very comfortable selling that player. If you go on to sell him, it's fine that you could buy somebody else in replacement, because I noticed that in Football Manager, even Lionel Messi, the best player that has ever played football since ever, I think. Okay, the best player in the modern generation, Messi on Football Manager is replaceable. So because at some point he's going to get older, he's going to get slower, and he's going to retire. So you need to find or keep in mind that if someone like Lionel Messi is replaceable on Football Manager, there is no player in the game that you cannot replace. So if you're comfortable with a wonder kid that you used him for a while, he's played so well for you, don't be afraid to sell him at some point. When it's time for him to go, let him go to a bigger club like PSG, and then go on to scout for another player, and then find a player that is much similar to him, even though younger, and then go on to train that player to become your world beater as well. The next lesson that we're going to talk about is related to your player roles and selecting player roles of Football Manager 2023. There's a huge debate about this one. I'm going to pick our best goalkeeper here, for example, in Andrew. I kind of like his name. It's very simple, Brazilian Andrew. So he's a wonder kid goalkeeper from my view, and he has eccentricity of 16. So when you're going into your tactics screen and then you're trying to figure out how you're going to select a role for Andrew, comparing Andrew with the second goalkeeper here, that is a 32-year-old in Stanislav Krutsiuk. Wow, love that name too. Krutsiuk is a standard goalkeeper on defend, or super goalkeeper on defend duty. He's very different from the player that we just looked at in Andrew. So if you have a tactic and then you have a super keeper on support, and then you're going to use your second goalkeeper that doesn't have that eccentricity or player attributes to play as a super keeper on support or defend, you're in trouble. So you need to find a way to select your players, select your player roles according to your players. So you're looking at Andrew, for example, that we had in mind. Back to the tactics screen, that we can see Andrew now, super keeper on support duty, very comfortable. But then if you bring in the other goalkeeper in Stanislav, whatever his name was, you'd notice that although he is a super keeper on support duty, and on the tactic it says that he's probably good enough to play this position, his player attributes say otherwise. So you may have problem playing him as a super keeper on support duty. So when you're going to select your player roles and you go on to change your players into the team, remember to also tweak those player roles to try and match the players that you're bringing into that position. So I've brought in Marlon into the squad now. Marlon is an inverted winger and winger on the left and on the right hand side. So Marlon is not the fastest player in my team, but he's good enough to actually just roam around the pitch and try to cause havoc for everybody else. So what happens is Marlon is an inverted winger on support duty here, but if you have Marlon play as a winger on support duty, you're asking him to do something that he probably doesn't have the attributes to do. So unless his weak foot is actually quite good, so you can see that Marlon, although being a winger on support duty on this hand side, he's very right-footed and not so left-footed. So some tactics you could be asked to use an inverted winger on this other role here, but that's not what Marlon's attributes actually recommend that he's able to do. So you could be asking a player to play a role that he's unsuitable for. So you have to know how to look at your players and then look at the player role that you're asking them to play, if they're actually capable of playing those roles. If they're not, then you're in trouble. And the AI is going to actually find a way to exploit this guy, because they know he's not going to cause them much problem on that flank. So they might actually go on to attack you using this flank because you're not causing them much problems down this zone anyway. So the next tip that we're going to look at is related to the data hub. Now, I didn't really like statistics when I was in school. I don't still think I like statistics that much, but on Football Manager, it's very vital that you actually look at the stats and then look at what the data hub has in store for you regarding the next team that you're going to play against. So looking at my team's general performance, due to being off season, I don't really have the data to actually show you what the next opposition is going to do. I'll find one and get back to you. But looking at my team's performance so far, the data hub doesn't only tell you what the opposition is doing, it tells you what your team is doing as well and how well your tactic is actually performing. And then looking at my Gil Vicente save, now my team was able to score 2.03 goals per game, so it means that we're doing quite well based on we're actually overachieving, because I don't think Gil Vicente is one of the best teams in Portuguese league anyway, but they're actually doing quite well. So it's also showing that we were conceding just as many goals as we were scoring. And then if you hover over to the player section and team section, you can actually get a bit more information on who your top performers are and how your goalkeeper is actually performing. You can see here there's a lot of passing and accurate passing from my goalkeeper in Stanislav Krusik. That's probably because the tactic has instructed that he takes short kicks and tries to be more safe when he's in possession of the ball. A different goalkeeper would actually act differently. So even if I have this Stanislav Krusik playing in that role, if you go on to play our Andrew in the same role, he's not going to do the exact same thing that Krusik is doing. He's actually going to play according to his attributes, because he has that eccentricity to start something out of the blue, and just so he's not going to be so safe with passing. So that's why you can get most of this information from the data hub. Regarding your position, I had to jump over to my Atletico Madrid save. Currently we are fit, and that is due to the lessons that we have learned the hard way in this Football Manager game. So what happened is I was suffering a lot in this game, but I'm going to show you what it has to do with your position. By the way, looking at your data hub in Football Manager, what I've learned so far is that there are not so many small teams anymore. Every team now has the capacity to beat you on Football Manager. There is no, let's say, Almeria, for example, and then you're going to actually get an easy win against Almeria. If you look at the schedule against Almeria, we're actually struggling for most of those games. Most of our matches just keeps ending 1-1. We don't lose. I've actually gone on a lengthy streak of, a lengthy undefeated streak. But Cadiz, Girona, Almeria, Elche, 0-0, 1-1. I was like, what is going on? And these teams just somehow find a way to hit you. So if you're not prepared, checking your position instructions, checking your team, your opposition, your next opposition that you're playing against using the data hub, they will go on to find a way to hurt you. And if you can't defend against them, that means you might just lose 3 points or lose 1 point. Sorry, 2 points. If you gain 1 point, you lose 2 points. So looking at the opposition instructions, remember to always come here, check the oppositions, overview their expected style of play, vertical tiki-taka or tiki-taka. Find a way to look at their top performance. You can see Rudiger here and Vinicius Jr. We already know that off the top of our head that they're quite good. So you might want to keep a player type marking Vinicius Jr. Looking at their goalkeeper's passing, if he's tense. Okay, Courtois does fewer passes, but they're accurate. So I think he plays out from the back, and probably the reason why it's fewer is because Real Madrid have limited pressure from the opposition anyway. So that's why Thibaut Courtois is all the way down here. So you need to just find a way to try and look at your opposition, see what they're doing, look at their scout reports, find a way to see how your team ranks up against them. Also look at the analyst reports to see where they're conceding goals and where they tend to score goals from. Find a way to build your tactic in defense to that, and it's going to help you gain a lot more points than you lose on Football Manager. So I learned most of these tips from The Art of Football Manager, an ebook by FM Blog. You can learn the first 5 principles of The Art of Football Manager from this next video here. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.